we have common ground with us. And we started, as was mentioned before by Tony, in 2005. And it's been a long time now working with common ground, organizing different conferences here, and always knowing the relevance that this conference has. Not only during these days, but afterwards, and seeing all the papers and everything that is published after the conferences. I want to thank Tony for the introduction, and of course, Monica for the organization of all these conferences here in Granada. Especially, I want to highlight the role of Tatiana, who has been working really hard in the organization of this conference. She's been working really hard, and I do really appreciate that work. University of Granada appreciates that work. Well, today I come to talk about diversity in education in Spain, which is almost impossible to talk in only 30 minutes, and see how things change from 1939, more or less, which is the time that I'm going to start talking about this role of diversity and how diversity has been seen from the political perspective and from the teaching practice. As I said, it's really difficult to put everything together in only half an hour, but I will try to give several ideas that can highlight what has been done in these years, and especially what has been done from the perspective of politicians, of politics, and then in the classroom, or what is being done now in what we call the clear teaching, the bilingualism, which has a big role now in teaching in Spain. And the first thing that I want to do is to go with the legal framework and see what has been doing in this country from 1939. You know, the Civil War ended by that time, from 1936 to 1939. And then education was, well, like in a silent period concerning diversity. And these students did not exist for most of the schools. These kids were more or less left at home, and was the role of the parents to take care of these situations. Situations that go from different perspectives and have a wide variety of different situations in the classroom that we will see. But in general terms, we can say that there was a silent period in that time. And in 1970, 5 years before the death of Franco, there was the General Law on Education, which is called in Spanish the Ley Villar-Martín, and that was the first time that we have in the 20th century a law that tries to organize the education system in Spain. And the thing is that there is a critical revision in this law of the 30 previous years, and there are good things done in that law, which was, as I told you, past 5 years before the death of Franco. For example, it tried to give equal opportunities to students coming from cities or small villages, which was something new, again, because most of these students finished their mandatory education, and that was it. I mean, they didn't have the money to come to the city to study at the university, for example. So that was the first try to give equality to the opportunities to these students. The mandatory age, I mean, the time that they were supposed to be at school, came up to 14, and now they could leave school when they were 14, but there was a gap there because they couldn't work till they were 16. So especially these kids who are not going to do upper secondary education or will not go to further higher education, we need the support, we need someone to take care of them. And that gap was absolutely terrible because they couldn't work and they were more or less again left at home or doing most of the time nothing. That law also guarantees the access to university. So it doesn't matter if you have the money or not, you can access the university, which is also good. There was a system of grants, and remember that was 5 years before the death of Franco. Diversity as such was not mentioned in the idea that we have now, only in the terms of, as I told you, giving equal opportunities to students coming from small villages or those living in the cities where they had more opportunities. It's curious because we had in Spain around 650,000 gypsies living here, and in that report from 2003, we see that 70% of them were still displaced. which is terrible, and that's bad news. And that's something that we have been trying to work, and you will see how things have changed from that time. Well, after the death of Franco in 1975, the Spanish Constitution was passed, and then that's the first time that we find that education is compulsory and every child should go to school till the age of 14 by that time. And there was a special plan for special education, a special plan for special education, in which, for the first time again, these special education groups appeared in mainstream schools. So now we had to bring these students who were most of the times left at home into the mainstream schools. That was the idea, that was the main purpose of this plan. But this plan only was running for 2 years due to the creation of the 17 different autonomous communities that we have in Spain. So we have 17 different governments, and every one of these governments have different rules concerning education. So this was only implemented for 2 years. In 1985, that was 7 years after the pass of the Constitution, this law was passed. That was the law on the right to education, and there was said that the interesting things in this law said that this basic education was compulsory for every single child living in Spain, and that it was compulsory and free, so no one should pay for this education, and that they could have access to high levels if they had the abilities, maybe if they passed all the exams and everything that they had in lower levels. So that was the first time that we see it in a written form, and after the Constitution, that every single child will have this. But there is something new in this law, and say it is good, because it appears in the first article. In number 3, section number 3 said that foreigners living in Spain will also have the right to education, as mentioned in sections 1 and 2 of this article. So it is not only for the Spanish students, but any single guy living here, any single boy or girl living here, will have the right to education, and will have to also go there. And this has a long story, but we don't have time to talk about that. But we have had many, well, traditionally some students, some boys and girls who didn't go to schools, or some other immigrants who came here and their parents didn't have the idea of the importance of taking them to schools. So this makes things compulsory, mandatory, and now from 1985, this is something that we all have to follow. Well, the big law, the big change came in 1990. That was 12 years after the Constitution was passed. It is terrible because it was, I mean, if Franco died in 1975, we were with the law of Franco's time for 15 years, and now someone changed this, created this, or passing this new law. That law was called the General Law for the Organization of the Spanish Education System, and it is the first mention now to other groups that we have to accept and work with at schools, no matter their beliefs, religions, sex, or opinion. So these were now included at school, which is also something that was changing the education system. When we say the education system, we here, the faculty or the university, should not forget that this is for schools. And we talk about these things, we should talk with teachers, class teachers, who are the ones who are really working with these students. So we can change the laws, but if we don't make them see the importance of these changes, we can be changing laws every 4 years, that we almost do here in Spain. Yeah, we almost do. And now we're going to have a different government. We still don't know if the current law is going to be fully implemented or not, or if they will bring a new education law, which is not really the best thing. Well, the big change there came. I was the head teacher in a school here in Granada in that time. I started in 1991, and there were 3 big changes, 3 big pillars in this law. And that was a big change in the perspective of teachers, of class teachers, of head teachers, and local authorities. Because you need money to do all these things. You need people to work, you need to train people, you need money to do all these previous things. And if you don't have money, it's really hard to organize this in a better way. So, the first thing was the adaptations of the curriculum. What is this? I mean, how can I adapt the curriculum? We have and that was said there, 3 different stages. The first one was to adapt and help those students who just need an extra push. Trying to break the idea of the traditional teacher who just came to the classroom, taught and left. And that was it. So he had many students who didn't come to the level. That's pity. And that was it. And now we have to work with these students. How? These special reinforcements that we were obliged to do and write a report saying that this has been done and that this is going to have these consequences. The second step, that was let's say, the less important in terms of the changes, is the non-meaningful, non-significant adaptation of the curriculum. What is that? That means that, for example, I have a student in secondary education who had a car accident or who just got sick and was at home for 4 months, maybe. He was doing all the homework and everything that we could send him from her from school. But when he comes to school, we teachers from that level are obliged to adapt the curriculum to make sure that he's going to reach the objectives, the proposed objectives, by the end of the school year. That was something that really changed things. Because it was not that you were teaching 30 students and now 29 because one of them is sick. It is that you have 29 plus these kids that you have to take care of also. Okay? And you have to prepare all the things that they have to do, which is good. That's really good. For that we need, and we will talk about this sometimes today, the cooperation of families, of course. And the third level of the adaptation of the curriculum is the significant adaptation of these contents and objectives and competencies that we wanted to achieve. How do we do this? Or with who do we do this? We do this with students with the Down syndrome, for example. Okay? They are welcome at schools. And that was a big change again for teachers. Because now teachers have 30 students, 25, and then if they have 25, they could have 1 at home who is sick. And they had 2 Down syndromes. And they had to work with them. Because these kids were and are much better in this mainstream school than in one school of special education. If the